Okay, so this is the Daf Yomi for April 24th, 2025. We're in Makkos 16. So it says, let's see, I'll back up to the end of 15. And they follow their standard lines of reasoning, as it is stated that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish disagreed in a case where one said, "On my oath, I will eat this loaf today," and the day passed and he did not eat it. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both say he is not flogged for taking a false oath. They disagree with regard to the reason that he is not flogged. Rabbi Yochanan says he is not flogged because it is prohibition that does not involve an action. He violates the oath by failing to perform an action rather than performing an action. And the principle is, with regard to any prohibition that does not involve an action, one is not flogged for its violation. Reish Lakish says he is not flogged because the forewarning in this case is an uncertain forewarning. One cannot properly forewarn him before he takes the oath, because as long as time remains in the day, he can still eat the loaf at the later time and fulfill the oath. And any uncertain forewarning is not characterized as forewarning. The Gemara asks, and both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as it is taught in the Baraita. It is stated with regard to the Paschal offering, "And you shall let nothing of it remain until morning, and that which remains of it until morning you shall burn in fire," Exodus 12:10. And the verse comes to position in the positive mitzvah of burning the leftover flesh after the prohibition against leaving over the flesh, to say that one is not flogged for its violation. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yochanan inferred this from the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. The reason he is not flogged is that the verse comes and positions the mitzvah after the prohibition. But if the verse had not come and positioned the mitzvah after the prohibition, he would have been flogged. Apparently, uncertain forewarning is characterized as forewarning, as he can be forewarned not to leave over the flesh of the offering, even though he would not be flogged were he to burn it. And Reish Lakish inferred this. The reason he is not flogged is that the verse comes and positions the mitzvah after the prohibition. But if the verse had not come and positioned the mitzvah after the prohibition, he would have been flogged. Apparently, one is flogged even for violating a prohibition that does not involve an action, as he violates the prohibition without performing an action. The Gemara asks, and according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, too, this is certainly a case of uncertain forewarning. Why then does he not conclude, based on Rabbi Yehuda's statement, that uncertain forewarning is characterized as forewarning? The Gemara answers, he holds in accordance with the opinion of the other Tana in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, as it is taught in a Baraita. And again, just as a reminder, I do have the other videos, another playlist to parallel this, the Bright Tote and the Tosefta, okay, which is a supplement. That's what Tosefta means, supplement to the Mishnah. Okay, so as it is taught in a Baraita, if a woman was divorced and remarried soon after, and a son was born 7 months after her remarriage and 9 months after her divorce, it is uncertain whether he is the son of the first husband or of the second husband. In that case, if this son struck this husband of his mother and then struck that husband, or if he cursed this husband and then cursed that one, and likewise if he struck both of them simultaneously or cursed both of them simultaneously, he is liable for striking or cursing his father. Rabbi Yehuda says if he cursed or struck both of them simultaneously, he is liable, but if he cursed or struck them one after the other, even if he was forewarned prior to cursing or striking each one, he is exempt. Apparently, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion that one is not flogged after uncertain forewarning, since in this case it is impossible to determine which of them is the father. Inevitably, the forewarning is uncertain. The Gemara asks, and according to Rabbi Yochanan too, this is certainly a case of a prohibition that does not involve an action. Why then does he not conclude, based on Rabbi Yehuda's statement, that one is flogged for violating a prohibition of that kind? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan holds in accordance with that which was cited in his name, as Rav Idi bar Avin says that Rav Amram says that Rav Yitzchak says that Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Yoshi HaGalili. With regard to any prohibition in the Torah, if it is a prohibition that involves an action, one is flogged for its violation. If it is a prohibition that does not involve an action, one is not flogged for its violation, except for one who takes a false oath, one who substitutes a non-sacred animal for a sacrificial animal, saying, this animal is substituted for that one, and one who curses another invoking the name of God. In those three instances, the perpetrator is flogged even though he performed no action. You got to love the chain of transmission that comes with the tradition of Judaism. It's, I learned this from this person, from this person, from this person. The Gemara asks, although the difficulties that were raised with regard to the opinions of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish were answered, the apparent contradiction from one statement of Rabbi Yehuda to another statement of Rabbi Yehuda is difficult. The Gemara cited contradictory statements of Rabbi Yehuda with regard to lashes, both in the case of a prohibition that does not involve an action and in the case of uncertain forewarning. The Gemara answers, if it is according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, the contradiction may be resolved with the explanation that the two sources reflect the opinions of two Tanaim, so two sages from the Mishnah, who disagree in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. If it is according to Rabbi Yochanan, the contradiction is not difficult, as this Baraita reflects his opinion that one is flogged for violating a prohibition that involves an action, and that Baraita reflects the opinion of his teacher, Rabbi Yoshi Hagalili, who holds that one is not flogged for violating a prohibition that involves an action. We learned in the Mishnah there, 17a, with regard to one who takes the mother bird with her fledglings, thereby violating the Torah prohibition, quote, and you shall not take the mother with her fledglings. You shall send the mother, and the fledglings you may take for yourself. Deuteronomy 22, 6 through 7. Rabbi Yehuda says he is flogged for taking the mother bird, and he does not send the mother. And the rabbis say he sends the mother and is not flogged, as this is the principle. With regard to any prohibition that entails a command to arise and perform a mitzvah, one is not liable to receive lashes for its violation. Rabbi Yochanan says, we have only this mitzvah and another where one would be flogged if not for the relevant mitzvah. Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Yochanan, which is that other mitzvah? Rabbi Yochanan said to him, you will know when you discover it yourself. Rabbi Elazar went out, examined the matter, and discovered the answer, as it is taught in Braita with regard to a rapist who divorced the woman he raped. If he is a non-priest, he remarries her, and he is not flogged for violating the prohibition, quote, he may not send her away all his days. Deuteronomy 22:29. And if he is a priest, he is flogged for violating the prohibition, and he does not remarry her. The Gemara states, this works out well according to the one who teaches that the criterion for determining whether one is flogged for violating a prohibition that entails fulfillment of a positive mitzvah is whether he fulfilled the mitzvah or did not fulfill the mitzvah. And if he does not fulfill the mitzvah immediately when he is instructed to do so, he is flogged when he fails to do so. But according to one who teaches that the criterion for determining whether one is flogged in that case is whether he nullified the mitzvah or did not nullify the mitzvah, and one is flogged only if he performed an action that renders it impossible to fulfill the mitzvah. Granted, with regard to sending away the mother bird from the nest, you can find a situation where he nullifies the mitzvah, that is, if he killed the mother bird. But in the case of a rapist, if the criterion is whether he nullified the mitzvah or he did not nullify it, how can you find a situation where the man is flogged because he nullified any possibility of remarrying her? If he cannot remarry her because he killed her, he will be executed, not flogged, because based on the principle he receives the greater punishment. Rabbi Shimi of Mechoza said he nullifies the possibility of remarriage in a case where he received on her behalf the money for betrothal from another, thereby ensuring that his own remarriage to her is no longer an option. Rav said that it is not a viable solution. If his ex-wife designated him as an agent to receive the money of betrothal on her behalf, it is she who nullifies the possibility of fulfilling the mitzvah for him, as a woman is betrothed only with her consent, and he is not liable at all. If she did not designate him as an agent, it is in his power to accept the betrothal on behalf of a woman who did not designate him to do so. His action is nothing, and the betrothal does not take effect. Rather, Rav Shimi of Haradea said he nullifies the possibility of remarriage in a case where he vowed in public that it is prohibited for him to derive benefit from her, and it is consequently prohibited for him to marry her. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says that a vow that was taken in public has no nullification. He is flogged, since by taking that vow he has rendered remarriage impossible. But according to one who says that even a vow taken in public has the possibility of nullification, what can be said? He can nullify the vow and remarry her. The Gemara answers, the reference is to a case where he vows on the basis of the consent of the public that it is prohibited for him to derive benefit from her, as Amaymar says that the halacha is a vow that was taken in public has the possibility of nullification. A vow that was taken on the basis of consent of the public has no nullification. The Gemara questions Rabbi Yochanan's statement, and are there no more prohibitions that entail fulfillment of a positive mitzvah for which one is flogged? But aren't there others? Before stating its challenges, the Gemara provides a mnemonic for the cases that it will cite: robbery, collateral, and payah. The Gemara elaborates, Isn't there a case of robbery where the merciful one states, "You shall not rob," Leviticus 19:13. It also states, quote, "And he shall return the stolen item," Leviticus 5:23. Isn't there the case of collateral where the merciful one states, quote, "And you shall not come into his house to fetch his pledge," Deuteronomy 24:10. And he then states, quote, "You shall return to him the pledge when the sun sets," Deuteronomy 24:13. The Gemara continues, "And you find that one is liable to receive lashes in those cases, both if the criterion is whether he fulfilled the mitzvah or did not fulfill the mitzvah, and if the criterion is whether he fulfilled the mitzvah or he did not fulfill it. According to the first criterion, he is flogged if he fails to return the stolen item or the collateral. According to the second criterion, he is flogged if he destroys the stolen item or the collateral." The Gemara answers there, in both cases, he is not flogged, since he is liable to remit monetary payment for the stolen item or the collateral, as the principle is, one is not both flogged and liable to pay restitution for one transgression. Rabbi Zera objects to this, but isn't there a case where he is not liable to pay? That is, if he appropriated the collateral of a convert and the convert died with no heirs. In that case, there is no payment, and nevertheless he is not flogged. The Gemara answers, there the man who appropriated the collateral is liable to remit monetary payment, and it is only that the lien of the convert on the property has lapsed, as there is no one to receive payment. Therefore, he is not flogged based on the principle, one is not both flogged and liable to pay restitution. The Gemara asks, but isn't there the case of peah, where there is a prohibition, as the merciful one states, "You shall not wholly reap the corner of your field," Leviticus 23:22, followed by the mitzvah, quote, "To the poor and the convert you shall leave them," Leviticus 23:22. And you find one liable to receive lashes in those cases, both if the criterion is whether he fulfilled the mitzvah or did not fulfill the mitzvah, and if the criterion is whether he nullified the mitzvah or he did not nullify it. As we learned in a Braita, the mitzvah of peah is not to separate it from the standing grain still growing from the ground. If he did not separate it from the standing grain, but reaped the entire field, he separates a portion from the sheaves as peah. If he did not separate it from the sheaves, he separates it from the pile where one places the kernels after threshing, before he smooths the pile. Once he smooths the pile, the produce is considered grain from which one is obligated to separate terumot and tithes. If he already smoothed the pile before designating the peah, he ties the grain in the pile and then gives the peah to the poor person. Once he grinds the kernels into flour, he no longer separates peah. Apparently, it is possible to nullify the possibility of fulfilling the mitzvah of leaving peah by grinding the grain. Why, then, did Rabbi Yochanan omit this case from his list of prohibitions rectified by a positive mitzvah for which one is flogged? The Gemara answers, Rabbi Yochanan holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael, who says one separates peah even from the dough. He maintains that the possibility of fulfilling the mitzvah of peah is never nullified, as one may never separate peah even after grinding and kneading. The Gemara challenges, and according to Rabbi Yishmael, you also find a way to nullify the possibility of fulfilling the mitzvah in a case where one ate the dough. Rather, the Gemara retracts its previous understanding of the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. We have only this mitzvah, and another where one would be flogged if not for the relevant mitzvah. The term "this" is in reference to the sending away of the mother bird, and the term "another" is in reference to this halakha of peah. But in the case of a rapist, no, the possibility of remarrying the rape victim whom he divorced is not nullified, even if he vows on the basis of the consent of the public. Where do we say that a vow on the basis of the consent of the public has no nullification? It is only in a case where one seeks nullification of the vow for the purpose of a matter that is optional, that is not a mitzvah. But if one seeks nullification of the vow for the purpose of a matter that is a mitzvah, even a vow taken on the basis of the consent of the public has the possibility of nullification. In the case of the rapist, he could seek nullification of his vow to enable him to fulfill the mitzvah of remarrying his divorcee, and therefore the vow can be nullified. The Gemara relates an incident that proves this point, as this happened in that incident where there was a certain teacher of school children who was negligent in his supervision of the children, and Rav Acha vowed, on the basis of the consent of the public, that he would no longer be allowed to teach children. And nevertheless, Ravina restored him to his position because no other teacher was found who was as accurate as he. Apparently, even a vow taken on the basis of the consent of the public has the possibility of nullification if that nullification is sought in order to fulfill a mitzvah. The Mishnah teaches, and one who eats unslaughtered animal or bird carcasses or treifot or repugnant creatures or creeping animals is liable to receive lashes. Rabbi Yehuda says, one who eats a fish-like creature found in the furrows of a field formed by a plow, benita deve karava, we flog him due to the violation of the prohibition, creeping animals that creep on the ground shall not be eaten. Leviticus 11:41. The Gemara relates, there was a certain person who ate a fish-like creature found in the furrows of a field formed by a plow, and Rav Yehuda flogged him. Abaye says, one who ate a putita, a creeping animal found in the sea, is flogged with 4 sets of lashes. There are 2 prohibitions stated with regard to creeping animals in the sea, and any that do not have fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, you shall not eat of their flesh. Leviticus 11:10-11. And, quote, and any that do not have fins and scales you shall not eat. Deuteronomy 14:10. In addition, there are 2 other prohibitions stated with regard to creeping animals in general. Quote, you shall not render yourselves detestable with any creeping animal that creeps, neither shall you render yourselves impure with them. Leviticus 11:43, for a total of 4. If one ate an ant, he is flogged with 5 sets of lashes, in addition to 2 prohibitions stated with regard to repugnant creatures in general. He is also flogged for violating the prohibitions, creeping animals that creep on the ground shall not be eaten. Leviticus 11:41. And, quote, and all creeping animals that creep on the ground you shall not eat. Leviticus 11:42. And neither shall you render yourselves impure with any manner of creeping things that creeps upon the ground. Of Leviticus 11:44. If one ate a wasp, he is flogged with 6 sets of lashes. Who would want to do that? In addition to the 5 prohibitions violated by one who eats an ant, he is flogged with an additional set of lashes due to a violation of the prohibition with regard to winged creeping creatures. Quote, and all winged creeping creatures are impure for you. They may not be eaten. Deuteronomy 14:19. Rabbi Chai says, one who delays relieving himself through his orifices when the need arises violates the prohibition of, quote, you shall not make your souls detestable. Leviticus 20:25. Rav Bevai bar Abaye says, one who drinks from the horn of a bloodletter through which blood has passed violates the prohibition of you shall not make your souls detestable. Rava bar Rav Huna says, if one crushed 9 ants and brought another one that was alive and thereby completed their measure to a olive balk and ate them, he's flogged with 6 sets of lashes. 5 for eating an entity for which one is flogged 5 times, as stated above with regard to one who eats an ant, and 1 for eating an olive balk of an unslaughtered carcass altogether. So Rava says, the Rabbi Yochanan says, even if he ate 2 crushed ants and the ant that was alive, he is flogged with 6 sets of lashes. So Rav Yosef says, even if he ate 1 crushed ant and the ant that was alive, the Gemara comments, and they do not disagree this case, where Rava and Rav Yosef say that he is flogged for eating 1 or 2 crushed ants and 1 is alive, is referring to large ants, which together amount to an olive balk. In that case, where Rava bar Rav Huna mentions 9 ants, is referring to small ants, as a greater number of ants is required to constitute an olive balk and render him liable. Consequently, there is no halakhic dispute in this case. The Mishnah teaches that among those flogged is one who ate untithed produce or first tithe produce, whose teruma of the tithe was not taken. Rav says, if one ate untithed produce from which teruma and first tithe were separated and poor man's tithe was not separated, he is flogged. The Gemara explains, in accordance with whose opinion did Rav issue this ruling? It is in accordance with the opinion of this Tana, as it is taught in a Braita, that Rabbi Yoshi says, one might have thought that one is liable for eating only untithed produce from which no gifts were taken at all. But if teruma gedola was taken from the produce, but first tithe was not taken from it, or if the first tithe was separated but not the second tithe, or even if only poor man's tithe was not separated, from where is it derived that the halakhic status of the produce is that of untithed produce and one is liable for eating it? The Baraita continues, it is derived as the verse states, you may not eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your wine, or of your oil. Deuteronomy 12:17. And there it states, and you shall give to the Levite, to the convert, and to the orphan, and to the widow, and they shall eat within your gates and be satisfied. Deuteronomy 26:12. Just as there, with regard to the phrase, quote, and they shall eat within your gates, it is referring to a poor man's tithe. Here too, you may not eat within your gates is referring to produce in which there is poor man's tithe, as it has not yet been separated. The merciful one states a prohibition. You may not eat it. So Rav Yosef said, this matter is subject to a dispute between Tanaim. Rabbi Eliezer says, one need not separate by means of calling the name upon poor man's tithe of doubtfully tithe produce, demay. With regard to produce purchased from an Am Haaretz, that is one who is unreliable with regard to tithes, there is a rabbinic ordinance requiring one to separate first and second tithe and truma from the tithe from it. Nevertheless, one is not required to separate poor man's tithe from that produce, because poor man's tithe is a monetary debt owed to the poor, and in a case of uncertainty, the principle is the burden of proof rests upon the claimant. Rabbi Eliezer holds that failure to separate poor man's tithe does not accord the produce the status of untithed produce. And the rabbis say, and then it continues tomorrow. So thanks for watching. So just a little note, there is another playlist that I just started. I do not believe in the New Testament, but I'm reading through it and I'm just pointing stuff out. So if you want to learn something, like if you got, I don't recommend that you waste your time reading the New Testament normally, but if you're a Messianic or if you're a Christian out there and that's your way of life and you want to see a different perspective and you want to see what the Jewish people would say if they were reading through it and they see the Jew hatred and all the other crazy stuff that's in it, that playlist is going to have it. So anyway, here we go. Good night.